apprentice.com. No material on this podcast should be considered medical advice. Birth is not a medical event.
Welcome to Indie Birth series of podcasts here on iTunes, Taking Back Birth. Hi, I'm Marin, and I'm here today with a special birth story guest. So I have Annika and baby Ruby here with me, and today we're going to hear Ruby's birth story.
Hi everybody, this is Annika. Some of you may know me, some of you may not. I am one of Marin's apprentices here in Sedona. It's kind of funny to try to find a place to start with these things, but I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I'm an Arizona native. I grew up in Flagstaff. I grew up with a love of birth stuff from the time that I was a really little girl, watching all of the very medicalized birth stories on Discovery Health Channel and just being completely enthralled and obsessed with it. And of course not knowing what context those came from or anything deeper than that, but just really enthralled with the idea of birth in general. And then I kind of left that interest for a while and studied other things and even went through college studying 3 or 4 different things and finally came back to it in the past few years, and it is on my path more than ever. And I began my apprenticeship and got pregnant pretty much right away. It was indeed a surprise. And Ruby has shown me so much and has been such a teacher already, that, nothing could have stopped her in coming in. That's for sure.
I like the timing of when she came in too, just personally, when you found out you were pregnant. Right. When was that? That was super cool.
Yes, so I found out that I was pregnant in the days after the Indie Birth Conference, and on the same date that David was born, actually, right after watching David come out 12 hours later, I took a pregnancy test in Marin's bathroom. Are you laughing? Are you laughing at that, Ruby girl? And so that was a really just wild thing in and of itself, very special souls, soul family coming together in very specific ways, I feel like. Oh, Ruby knows we're talking about her. She's off the boob, ready to
Yeah, she's totally listening. Yeah, I chose that. So what?
Right. But I guess I could talk about even in November, I was feeling like a little soul around me after I met my partner, Matt, the September previously, and we started hanging out more. I could definitely feel somebody around me, a little spirit baby. And she came to me in dreams, and at first I thought her name was something different, maybe even somebody else different. I've thought maybe even a threshold or guardian soul coming in to help usher her through. And I thought I might be pregnant in November. That didn't happen, but I remember it being notable in that it was the first time that I felt really comfortable with the prospect of possibly being pregnant and feeling like I was actually ready for that, and whatever that means. And so my bleed indeed did come, and that next March I was feeling like it was possible that it was there. After I ovulated, I realized that, that's a possibility. That could have happened. And we had the Indie Birth Conference, and I remember just feeling really potently, just really powerful ancient knowledge during that conference. Of course I would have felt that even if I wasn't pregnant, but getting to experience that and feeling the depth of where it was coming from, I definitely, in hindsight, realized that, wow, that was very divinely orchestrated as well. And so it was a couple days after the Indie Birth Conference that David was born, and it was a big shock, but not really also. I remember sitting outside of Whole Foods talking to Marin and just kind of being in tears even before I had taken the pregnancy test, before David was born, everything, just thinking about how big it was and how overwhelming everything felt, and everything that went along with it. So that was pretty monumental. And, for those of you who don't know me, I am a lady of size. I am a large woman, have been my whole life. And so some of the first thoughts that I was blessed to have, and that I think a lot of women of size come to, are feelings of fear. It's kind of what we're programmed with. Women in general in birth, definitely, but especially women of size, we're told that we are high risk no matter what anything else says or no matter what we believe inside of ourselves. And we are treated as such unless we consciously choose differently. And so I dealt with a lot of those beginning fears. And
what kind of stuff comes up for people that don't know? Like, what would you read if you were in that category to scare you?
Right. So one of the first things I did was go on Facebook and find some of the biggest plus size mommy groups, just to, get my feet in. What is happening in this community, and what can I find maybe that's helpful for me, was honestly my first thought. And to my dismay and sadness, honestly, is that most of the women in the particular group that I had joined were coming out with C-sections. Wow. Almost all of them. And lots of women being diagnosed with quote-unquote gestational diabetes, which is a whole other topic on itself, which Marion has a great podcast on. And women diagnosed with preeclampsia after only having their blood pressure taken, like things like that, or being told that their baby is gigantic and then the baby is born after induction 3 weeks early and it's only 5 pounds.
Yeah, that's so sad.
So I saw a lot of things like that in these communities, and I needed to deal with my own fears around that. And so I did as much research as I could on what is called gestational diabetes and what that actually means and what it doesn't mean, and all of the stigma around it and what's really real about those things. And I had to deal with even feelings of shame, because as a woman of size, you're often labeled even as being reckless to get pregnant.
Why? Where does that come from?
Just that your baby couldn't possibly be healthy and you couldn't possibly have a nice birth unless you're smaller. Which
that's deep, huh?
Ruby was ready to prove completely wrong and blast out of the water. Totally. So it definitely, but I still felt those things, even with all this knowledge, even if with the experience that I've had, I still had to experience the fears that I was programmed with and move through anyways, as Ruby has her own bowel movement happening. She's moving through as well, in case any of you heard that.
What would you attribute these, quote unquote, risk factors actually to? These are women that, I don't know, aren't eating maybe because they're scared to, and then their nutritional status is not great, or what are those outcomes actually about when you were doing your digging and trying to figure out what was what?
Right.
What's your perspective on that?
A lot of what I found is women's care providers recommending that they restrict in a lot of big ways. And so a lot of these women either didn't gain any weight through their pregnancies, some even lost weight, some said, I only gained 5 pounds. It was really wonderful.
Starving themselves.
Right.
Oh my gosh.
And then, they get surprised when they get major issues, or when they are diagnosed with what really is preeclampsia and, everything that goes along with these health issues when their blood volume is constricted so much. And so
it's a self-fulfilling prophecy in a lot of ways. Then.
Exactly. Right. And I honestly think it goes deeper than we can really deal with in one podcasts, and it's on an individual level.
Yeah, we should do another one just on that.
Right, yeah. Women of size in general, we are programmed our whole lives to believe that our bodies are worthless and don't function right, and to hate our bodies. Yeah. And so why would we believe that it would function any different when it comes to pregnancy and birth than what we believed our whole lives? So it was a lot of stigma to break through for myself inside as I was moving into acceptance. I remember sharing with you before I even knew for sure that I was pregnant that one of my, even if surfacey types of fears, was that I wasn't going to be able to see my belly grow in the same way a thinner woman would. And it did take a while for me to be able to see my belly growing in the shape of it changing. But by the end of my pregnancy, there was no way you could really mistake that I was pregnant. I looked like a big pregnant lady.
You had a great belly.
And I loved it. And so, yeah, you have a whole bunch of things that come up. And yeah, I would love to do another podcast on that sometime soon where we can really, dig into some of those things. But yeah, it definitely played a part in a lot of pieces of my pregnancy. And throughout, I had moments where I second-guessed myself, like thinking, am I nuts? Am I totally reckless? Like, is that what I'm doing? And then every time, I would check in with Ruby, and she's like, no, this is what I want. Stop it. You're fine. We're fine. Chill out. That was generally her message through the pregnancy. Quit micromanaging me was another one. So, yeah, I guess I can progress through the pregnancy. So I did have a little bleeding in the first trimester and a little bit into the second trimester. Spotting every few days, or would last a few days here and there. And never really figured out on a physical level what that was about. I ended up going to get an ultrasound at the ER, which was an interesting experience all in itself. It was kind of a cool experiment to go get to be in that paradigm for a minute. Totally. And get to call the shots and make sure that they knew that I knew what I wanted and that they weren't going to order what I was going to do. And it was kind of funny to see them kind of squirm a little bit until, they figured it out. And then they came and asked me what I wanted.
Yeah.
So amazing. It was really interesting. But nothing showed up on that ultrasound. Everything just looked perfect and good, and no hematoma whatsoever, which is what I was curious to see if there was. And there wasn't. So I believe that, physical conditions can cause bleeding, and then also sometimes there's mystery bleeding, and I might never necessarily know what that was really about. On a deeper level, I think that was more about what things that I was struggling with as far as acceptance of the circumstances.
I remember you saying that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And once I realized that and kind of leaned into it and let it go a bit and just leaned into the fact that, Ruby's going to be here if she wants to be here. And if she doesn't want to be here, she won't be here. And I don't really get to be in charge of that. And just trusting. That was a really huge thing for me coming back to over and over. If I don't trust myself, if I don't trust the rest of life, if I don't trust anything else, I do trust my baby. And that's what I kept leaning on over and over and over. I trust my baby and what she's telling me that she wants and needs, whether she stays or goes. And so the bleeding did stop. I didn't have any more spotting after about 16 weeks. And continued growing and eating as I needed to, doing the very best I could to keep up with the calories and the different food groups and the protein that I know my baby needed in order to grow, despite what many plus-size women would be told to do differently. And it was a mind fuck, please excuse my French, to be gaining weight when my whole life I had been told that I shouldn't gain weight.
Right.
I remember at a particular mama circle getting really emotional about my changing relationship with my belly. because my whole life I was taught to hate my belly. And I think this is a pretty universal thing
Sure,
for a lot of women
sure.
in our culture, not just bigger women. But if you have a belly, it's supposed to be something that you hate and you want to get rid of.
Well, yeah, we're sucking it in all the time. I mean, pregnancy is one of the only times that most women feel they can let it out, regardless of their size.
Exactly.
Right.
And so I remember being really going through a lot as far as accepting my belly and trying to change my entire way of seeing it and experiencing it, which I did. By the end, I loved my belly, and I have videos of Ruby Rubying around in there, kicking and sticking her butt out and just, being her. And so it was a beautiful thing to watch my relationship with my body and food change throughout this pregnancy, because I had to. I didn't weigh myself at all through the pregnancy. And, for some women, they might want to, doing whatever is right for them. But for me, I knew it would just add in a whole level of mind games that I really didn't need to participate in. So I kept growing, and we ended up moving like 4 times through the pregnancy, which is interesting. I find that pregnancy often brings up a lot of root chakra issues, foundations like living space and finances and feeling okay to survive, which makes sense because that's the area that pregnancy is mostly happening in, that and sacral. So that was a big thing during my pregnancy. And as we started getting closer, it was pretty wild to just think like, wow, this is actually happening. There's a baby in there, and she's going to come out, and there's going to be a person in the world that used to be inside of me. And still, not even now that she's out, it's like, how did that even happen? How was that you? And so as we got closer, I started to feel what I call like the birthing tides coming for me. You start being kind of taken out into different brainwave patterns even. Like if they were to put electrodes on me at that time, and for other pregnant women too, I bet they could definitely tell the difference. Just the different headspace that you're in. And so I started feeling that coming around 37, 38 weeks. And then by about 40 weeks, I started having contractions. Really early contractions though, just little tightenings that didn't really seem to be going anywhere, but just kind of signaling, oh, something's going on down there. And at that point, I started also releasing just tiny bits of mucus. Not really anything significant, just really small little bits here and there. And my due date was technically December 3rd, guess date. And that came and went. And the 2 weeks after my guest date, it's a really interesting place to be in, because really it's like our babies don't work in like time. They don't care what date it is. And getting out of my brain to release that was, a journey like it is for any other mama. And some days were fine and I could just like deal with it and live my life. And other days it was like, Ruby, why don't you want to be here? I remember just like sitting in bed and crying and being like, she doesn't want to be here. That's why she's not coming yet. She doesn't want to be born. And maybe I was right. She didn't want to be born yet.
Yeah, then.
Right. And so a couple days before she was born, I think on the Sunday before, she was born on a Tuesday, and that Sunday I texted Marin saying that I was feeling really sad and just kind of off, and Ruby was moving a little bit less. But throughout the whole pregnancy, Ruby had really strange patterns where she would like move a ton for a day or two or a few hours, and then have sections of hours or sections of a couple days even where I would be like near silence. And most people would suggest, oh, you should do kick counts, or, it's totally
Sure.
reasonable to do that and to check in that way. But every time I thought about it, or every time that I would freak myself out and be like, my baby's not moving, she would just tell me, stop micromanaging me. I'm just me. Stop. You don't need to do all these things. You don't need to, go down the rabbit hole. And so listening to her and listening to my intuition, I didn't. Some other women might need to do those things and their intuition tells them differently, which they need to do that then, But for me and Ruby, no. So that day when I was feeling kind of sad and down and she wasn't moving very much, and in my head I was like, oh, well, that's just kind of Ruby, she's just kind of doing her own thing. And I said, but it would be nice to check in with her, listening to her heartbeat, just to kind of say hi and check in that way. Not because I was concerned with anything necessarily, but just to say hi. And so that Monday, I woke up feeling really peaceful, actually. And I had honestly a pretty stressful pregnancy due to the foundational finance root chakra issues that I was talking about before. And I hadn't had a lot of days that were super peaceful. And so this is definitely a new feeling. And so I woke up, stood up, and I started having bits of tightenings when I would stand up straight. And when I started walking around the kitchen, I would have to stop for a moment and just feel it and let it flow in. And I said something to my partner, Matt, about it too. And I don't usually like to say things to him too quickly because he gets excited. He's like, oh yeah? Is that what's happening? And I didn't need that yet. So I tried to just keep it low key. But was still thinking, okay, probably in the next couple days here. But I had also kind of been saying that for the past 2 weeks.
Right.
So.
Right. At some point.
Right. I remember you keep telling me well, at some point it will mean something. Yeah, maybe it does. And so, I started losing more little bits of mucus, and I got ready to go across town to come visit Marin at her office. And I remember us listening, and Rubies Thing is that she would always try to hide. She was a very mysterious little baby in there, and she would always try to hide and get in kind of funny positions where you had to really work for it if you wanted to hear her. But we eventually did a little bit, and we were going to try to do, we did an acceleration test, right?
Did we actually do it? I don't even remember.
It wasn't really effective because that was one of the days that she wasn't really moving very much at all. So she was just sitting there, which you can't really do it when she's just sitting there sleeping. I know, you tricky babe. And so, we found the heartbeat, but we couldn't really do the test. And honestly, I was like, it's all right. She's fine. And, she's doing what she's doing. So I think we just kind of let it go. And I remember getting some bigger contractions standing at your kitchen island, talking with your kids and doing stuff. And then I left and went to the grocery store. And I remember sitting in the grocery store parking lot, just sitting on my phone, kind of thinking about dates and thinking about babies in general and just, how it's so funny, their timing. And I looked over to a lamppost over to my left that had a sticker that said 19 on it, which was the date of the next day. And it just occurred to me oh, that's the day she's going to be born, I think. And indeed it was.
Indeed.
And so I went home. I was having contractions probably every 15 minutes at that point, but they were still pretty light, only 30 seconds long. Definitely in early labor. I could tell that it was going to progress at some point. And it definitely, the contractions didn't get closer together, but they definitely got harder through the evening. Still was able to deal with it, but it was quite intense, menstrual-like pains for sure. And I tried some time on the birth ball and ate some pasta. I remember feeling very fondly that was going to be my last meal at the grocery store. It was
the last meal.
Right. It was prosciutto stuffed into raviolis or something like that. It was ooh, that sounds like a great, birthy marathon prep meal.
Yeah.
And so Matt made me food while he kind of like went around the house as quickly as possible, like a little tornado as he does, and cleaned the house pretty fast, just last minute things, and got everything ready. And we tried to go on a walk that night. That didn't really work. We got like 30 seconds away from the house, and the contractions got so bad that when I did that we had to go back. It was too much. I was like yelling on the street corner next to some like vacation rentals. So we walked back to the house, and I decided to try to just lay down and sleep because I was feeling super tired anyways. And I did. I was able to fall asleep after a while, even though like end of the pregnancy sleep is kind of weird and hard to like pin down sometimes.
Yeah,
anyways.
it's so hard.
And so I would wake up for contractions, each one like half awake. And I got about 3 hours or so of interrupted sleep with the contractions. And at that point I was having like 3 to 5 contractions an hour. And I woke up at like 3:30 and was just like, I can't just be asleep. I can't deal with this anymore. I can't lay down for these anymore. And made myself toast with peanut butter and bananas. Because I was like, I'm going to eat. Like, no matter what. Like, that is my number one rule. I have to eat and drink. I had prepared myself for, like, a marathon, super long labor. Right. Because that's what some of what I had seen.
I was going to say, I think you have a unique perspective, of course, like having seen births and seeing first-time moms, like, more likely than not.
Right, yeah.
Have it be, like, something that we're needing them to, like, eat and drink and rest and all the things that you were doing so well.
Totally, exactly, right. So the whole 9 months of my pregnancy, I had been attending births with Marion where we did see a lot of first-time moms, actually. With all types of labors, but, a first-time mom having a longer labor is usually what's going to happen more than something else. And so I was preparing myself for that. At the same time, my biggest fear going into labor for pretty much my whole pregnancy was that not that myself or my baby weren't going to be safe or we were going to have bad outcomes in that way, but that I wasn't going to be able to handle the pain. Right. That was a fear that I dealt with the whole pregnancy and like the main thing going into the birth. And so I was just thinking, okay, well, how am I going to do the best for myself in order to be able to handle this? And eating and drinking were the main things. So I had my snack at like 3:30 in the morning and continued to labor by myself while Matt was asleep, and he can sleep through anything. So I was moaning with each contraction too. And I was finally, by like 6 a.m., I was finding it pretty hard to cope, like by myself and just like in my own headspace of 3 hours of sleep. And I remember having used the toilet, I didn't feel like I could poop enough, honestly. Yeah. Like, I couldn't get anything out, and I realized now that was pressure already, that she was right there, kind of. And I remember standing at the threshold between the bedroom and the bathroom with all the lights off, being a little overwhelmed by that last contraction, and then closing my eyes and, like, going into a headspace and saying, okay. And then I kind of treated that like a mantra and ended up going, okay. And that's kind of when things clicked into another space. And so at that point, I called my mom to drive down from Flagstaff, which is about 40 minutes to our house. And I had a contraction on the phone with her, and I was crying, and I said, I just want my mom. Aww. Which I think is kind of a unique thing, in that a lot of women don't necessarily have that type of relationship with their mom where they could call on them to be at their undisturbed birth. Totally. And so that was really special. And at that point, I just knew I needed her there. And Matt kind of woke up and he was like, you could have woken me up, babe, if you needed me. And I said, I want my mom.
Not you. Go back to sleep.
I mean, that was kind of, I just wanted my mom there. And my mom had 3 unmedicated births as well. And so I could, I knew that I could count on her to know and to be able to be the rock in that way. So she started heading down, and I continued to labor, and by the time she got there, I was coping a little bit better, and by that time the sun was up, and I had Matt put up all of our shades. I wanted it to stay dark in the space, and she made me an omelet and had some breakfast. I think I had texted you, and we had thought that it was pretty early still because the contraction pattern was still quite erratic, which continued to the end pretty much. It was every 12 to 15 minutes there would be a cluster of contractions with one really strong, really hard one that was like 30 seconds long, and then every minute after that for like 6 minutes there were little ones that were less intense but still pretty dang intense, just short. And so I didn't really understand what was going on or like really where I was in labor because it was so hard, but it was a really strange pattern to where I was like, you can't get a baby out with 30-second contractions. Ruby proved that wrong for me.
Right.
And so I had eaten breakfast, and at that point I couldn't sit down. I couldn't lay down for any of the contractions. I had to be up, and my mom was doing counter pressure on my back, which was super, super helpful in helping me cope. I think a lot of laboring women may have this when they find their one position or their one like space where they can do the contraction. They have to go back to it each time. And so in between contractions, I would just sit. And then for each cluster of contractions, I needed to be in the threshold of a doorway. Right. With hand on each side, just kind of bracing myself there. Which is interesting because like birth is a threshold, and I always called myself the dweller of thresholds with all the different things that I do, and it was just
that is cool.
Fun that was where my laboring space was. And so throughout the morning, my mom was making me electrolyte drinks, and it finally got to a point where I was like, I can't go through an entire day, a night of this until she is born if I don't sleep. I was really feeling exhausted and just very tired. Not exhausted, really. That's more full body than what I was experiencing. I was feeling tired. I was feeling sleepy and in need of rest. And at that point, I thought, this isn't happening soon. I'm not having contractions longer than 30 seconds. And I think I had texted you at some point. I was still trying to be in my midwife brain too, and like, texting you everything that was happening as if I was at somebody else's birth.
Yeah, like totally coherently.
Like an hour and a half before Ruby was born, I gave you a rundown.
This is early.
Yeah, I'm totally early still. I was sure, but still like, why is this so hard? And now I can see that it was very
must have
close.
been a struggle to be trying to integrate that in your brain that wasn't fully working anyway.
Right. And I remember you saying, because I said, I think I'm afraid to go to the next level without any sleep. But I don't know if I can sleep. I've been trying to rest.
Right.
Because my mom said, okay, well, you need to lay down on the couch in between contractions. I'm just like, oh, okay, because laying down was completely awful. And so I ended up trying to lay down in between contractions. Didn't really work, and said to my mom, okay, I need a smoothie. I need something else. I need some more sustenance. And she made me a really awesome smoothie and brought it to me, and I chugged like half of it down. Thankfully, I wasn't having a labor where I was nauseous or like intolerant to any foods. It was just like, I could suck it down. I'm so grateful for that. And then chugged another quart of electrolyte drink. I think I went through like a gallon of electrolyte drink within like 3 or 4 hours. It was nuts. And so I chugged down my smoothie and another electrolyte drink, and I could feel my body just kind of like relax, but then also the very next contraction, it was like pow pow, like holy crap, my body was like, okay, we have fuel, let's do it. And I said to my mom, I need to sleep. And I think you texted me back that you must rest. You must sleep. I know it may seem impossible or really hard, but you must. And then you added on a few minutes later, you can do it, whatever it is. And later we find out that the whatever it is was giving birth without sleeping.
Totally.
And so then I was like, okay, I'm going to sleep. And I was very determined, and I had eaten and I had hydrated myself, and I decided I was going to have some of the really strong pain CBD tincture that a girlfriend of mine had made for my labor. And so I took a big dose of that and was going to take a shower and then get in bed, and I was going to sleep.
That is so funny. I wish I could have just been there, like a fly on the wall, to see you trying to sleep while your body was
in transition,
about to
basically
push a baby out. Like, that must have been so classic.
I was determined. And so I get in the shower, and at this point, contractions are really intense.
I bet.
If I wasn't already in transition, this is what really sent me there. And so I got in the shower, and it seemed in some ways better being in the shower. Like, it felt good to be in the shower, that's for sure. But at the same time, like, the intensity of the contractions was still there. They spaced out a tiny bit in the shower, but only for the matter of minutes that I was in there. I was probably in the shower for maybe like 15, 20 minutes before the hot water ran out.
Yeah.
And so I remember my mom coming in and just being like, is the CBD supposed to make things go slower or make things go faster? Or like something to that. Is it supposed to make it easier or harder? And I was like, it's supposed to just take the edge off. And she later tells me, she was kind of like, okay. Because I guess that my sounds had definitely escalated since I had taken that and gotten in the shower. And looking back on it now, the combination of those two things really allowed my body and just like my mindset to just like relax and really go inward, because I had been trying to keep tabs on myself.
Sure, that's the hardest thing to do. It really is.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a midwife yet, but I was totally in midwife brain because that's what I'm used to, being around birth. And so after I got in the shower and had the CBD, I totally got into that zone. And as I was getting out of the shower, my mom said, do you want to put on a house dress? Because I had been wearing a nightgown all morning, and I had kind of planned that I wanted to wear one of my grandmother's house dresses while I was laboring. And I was really disjointed in thought and was trying to tell her which one, and I couldn't really get the words out.
Yeah.
And they couldn't find the one that I had finally said with my words, and I was kind of just like, ugh, I don't really care. And I remember in my brain, like, the midwife far, far, far in the back of my brain was like, oh, okay, you're not putting back on clothes. Okay, here we are. and so I get out of the shower, and the plan in my brain was still to go try to get into bed. And at that point, I also told my mom, no more texting for me. No more texting for me. And she's like, okay, no more texting. And that was also a signal in my brain, okay, no, we're not doing, we're going here. We're going there. And so I labored on the toilet for a while, still feeling super intense pressure, and just like, I kept telling my mom, my butt hurts, and it really does. Thinking that I had to poop more, but it was just a baby. And so labored there for a while. It got super intense to the point where I was just like, I can't be on the toilet anymore. It's super intense. And so I got up and went into the bedroom, and I was kind of angry at that point and just like disgruntled. I didn't know what I wanted. I see now that the adrenaline was starting to ramp up.
Yeah.
For that transition point and pushing. And so I was ordering people around and told Matt, put the towel down on the bed. Put a Chucks on it. No, put a Chucks on it. And even though I was in that kind of funny, disjointed place, I very much like was directing everything, which I think was really cool.
That's amazing. I've seen women do that in labor, like in all scenarios, whether it's with their kids or whatever. Like, there's a part of your brain that can still like control your environment to a certain point, and like you can be really clear and direct. And for some women, they're not even like that in real life. It's like a fascinating labor director thing.
Totally, especially when it's in an undisturbed environment, when a woman feels safe to do so and like really take charge of that experience.
Yeah.
Like, it's incredible. And I don't, like, if you had asked me after the birth if I felt powerful and in charge and taking charge, I would have said absolutely no. I feel like after the birth, I felt kind of traumatized by the pain, which I can talk about a little bit later, and how intense and fast it was. But when I look back at like the actual my actual actions and like the processes that I went through, it was an incredibly powerful labor and birth.
Oh, I bet.
And so I ordered him to put down the Chuck's pad onto the bed because I felt like I needed to pee so bad. I had a gallon of electrolyte drink.
Sure. And a baby on your bladder.
Right.
Or past your bladder, maybe.
And I wasn't thinking about that at the moment. And so I thought, I just need to pee, but I couldn't get myself to pee on the toilet. And so I thought maybe a different position would help. And so I was going to pee on the Chuck's pad on the bed. So, and they were like, I could feel my mom and Matt kind of like judging me the slightest bit. They didn't say anything, but I could feel them being like, on the bed? And I was like, yes, put the Chucks down. And so as I was mounting myself onto the bed, all the curtains were shut, but this was at a time of year where there weren't many birds out. But I heard this really obnoxious bird that I had never heard before, ever, in our neighborhood or even in Sedona. Just like a really unique bird sound. I couldn't mimic it to this day, even if I wanted to. And Matt or my mom said something about the bird, like, "Oh, do you hear that bird? That's interesting." And I was like, "They know, they know something's happening." Kind of in my like funny, crazy little brain. And I was trying to get comfortable in that position and trying to pee in that position. And I couldn't get anything out at all. I had them stack up pillows, and I just kept saying, more, more, more. But I kept just falling all over myself in the middle of really intense transition contractions and just like sick of it and pissed off and like, I don't know what to do, and trying to pee. And every time I needed to pee, I realized that it was a contraction starting. So I was like, okay, that's what's happening. And so I just got sick of it in between contractions, which at this point were almost on top of each other. The large gap wasn't there anymore, but they were only 30 seconds long each, but with very little break in between. And I wasn't in a mind in order to be able to call you. And I remember getting up from the bed, about to go run back to the bathroom to reclaim my throne at the toilet. And Matt said, "Can we call Marin yet?" Because he had been asking all morning. Right. "Can we call Marin? Can we call your mom? Are you ready yet?" Yeah. And I kept saying no, because I kept thinking, I don't want her to get over here too early and then like have to wait around and go back to West Sedona. Like,
right. It's one or the other sometimes.
Right. And so it's interesting that he had asked that, because literally a second prior to that, I thought in my head, okay, Marin should probably come over now. And then he asked me immediately after without me saying anything. And so as he went to go get the phone to call you, or go find my phone wherever I had disposed of it, I ran back to the bathroom to get back on the toilet. And I had a really super intense contraction where I felt my energy like shoot upwards. Like it was that, like hitting me like a truck almost. Right. Like that intense that I tried to get away from it. Like I jumped up off the toilet even and kind of screamed. And I just remembered I recognized the feeling that I was experiencing from witnessing other women give birth. Yeah. And in those moments, I watched you say to these women, "You're safe, love. You're safe. You're safe." And the first time I heard you say that to a woman, I thought it was interesting. I was like, why would they think they're not safe? But like I had observed that and just, oh yeah. I mean, I understood it intellectually after observing it. And then in that moment, when that contraction kind of hit me like a truck, I realized, oh, that's, it's scary because you have the combination of that with the adrenaline that you're getting when you're about to push out a baby, and it's can feel really scary because you are absolutely not in control of it. Absolutely not.
Right.
And there's no, like, you're on the front of a train trying to, like, hold on for dear life, basically.
Totally. And that's the moment that people say all kinds of stuff.
Right.
That when you're witnessing, you're like,
Here we
or,
are.
You kind of chuckle inwardly, like, yep. But they mean it when they're like, I'm dying, or whatever variation it is. I'm always like, I can't do it. Totally. It's not happening, or whatever it is. I don't know what you said, but maybe you said nothing. I don't know.
Well, I screamed and then, like, started realizing that all my energy was going upwards. And that's something that I saw in labors with some of the folks that I had witnessed that fall, when they were, even people who were uncontrollably throwing up because all the energy was going up instead of going down. And so I was like, okay, no, we can't have that. So everything needs to go down. And I had started to get, like, the tiniest bit nauseous. And I was like, nope. I'm, like, not doing that. And so I was like, okay, it needs to go down. And at that point, my mom was in front of me while I was on the toilet and just kind of, like, swaying with me and holding my arms and, like, letting all my weight be on her and just, like, move me in circles, kind of. And just trying to breathe all of that energy down. And in the next contraction, I had the same, like, getting hit by a truck feeling in my pelvis. And I screamed again and then kept saying over and over, I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm safe, I'm safe. And that was really, like, the power of those words was incredible in that moment. I could not, like, even describe how much that was powerful in those moments, to remember that I am safe and that this was happening and that it was okay.
Good. Yeah.
It was good and it was okay that it was happening. And so Matt found the phone and he had you on the phone. He had you on speaker, I think, and he was trying to describe what was happening, and he was saying, you should come over. And I think you asked, like, okay, what's going on? And my mom started trying to explain and was saying things about 30-second long contractions. And the last thing that you knew, because I hadn't texted you in like an hour and a half maybe, was that I was having, like, clusters like 12 to 15 minutes apart. So I was like, what the heck?
Yeah.
And I'm sure you were like, what is going on? And I think you said, let me talk to her. And I was sitting on the toilet and heard you say that. And I was like, oh, I can't talk. So I tried to start saying words. And then I could feel another contraction starting to come on. My mom was like, here, she's having one now. Listen.
I will never forget that.
And I, like, screamed out because that was the first contraction that I had where I could feel her coming right into my pelvis. And it felt like bones breaking to me. And I'm sorry for any first-time moms who are listening to this. I don't want to scare you. Like, you may experience it completely different than I do. To me, it felt like bones breaking with her coming into my pelvis. And after that contraction, I remember you saying ever so calmly, okay, well, I'll come over and we'll see what's going on.
Well, and I don't know if I told you this, but obviously, like, you were having a baby, and Amelia was standing next to me when I had it on speaker, and we heard Annika, like, having a baby, and, you know, I mean, I hung up, and Amelia was laughing, and she's like, you're not going to make it, or something along those lines, you know, so it was sort of more than obvious at that point. But what was there to say? Like, okay, time to come over.
Right? And so, so there was that contraction on the phone with Marin. And then maybe, and at that point, my mom reminded me, touch down, see if you can feel her. And I was kind of scared to touch my own body for some reason, which is something that I kind of want to unpack and, like, think more about. Like, why was I super hesitant to, like, feel my own body? And so I did. And I didn't feel her head yet, but I could feel the tissues there starting to bulge. And could tell that she was going to be crowning on the next contraction. And so, at that point, once I realized that she was, like, coming, I found this whole new, like, power in myself where I felt like, okay, I'm kind of more, not in control, but like, oh, this is happening. you know?
Totally. And that's like something I feel like, not to, get in the way of your birth story, but just for like consistency's sake, like it's so common. I was saying that on Dava's when I was reliving her birth story.
Right.
And I had just witnessed a birth, and it was like, yeah, like why is it the baby coming into the pelvis is like the earth shattering,
Oh my
and
God.
then it's like night and day, and women regain like control and composure. Not that it's about control, but just
Sure.
like emotional stability,
Right.
which is neither bad nor good, but it's just like an interesting contrast, like those two physiological things happening
Right.
with like how the emotional state
Uh-huh.
changes.
That's exactly it. Yeah. That contraction with you on the phone, like everything shattered. Like my entire identity, my entire like life that I had been living, my sense of
Right,
like
on every
anything,
level.
every level,
Yep. Shattered.
leveled,
Gone. Broken.
broken. Yes, to make way for she who is Ruby. So so maybe like 20 seconds or less later, the second of the 3 fetal ejection reflexes came and pushed her head out. I had no control over it, no pushing on my part whatsoever. It was just my body moving with a force that I honestly didn't know it was capable of without me trying to direct it. And that was a really intense feeling. I honestly can't remember it enough at this moment to be able to describe it really well.
You forget it, I feel like.
It wasn't painless. It for sure wasn't painless, which I know that some women do experience when the head is being born. It's not very bad.
Yeah.
But it wasn't painless. It was quite intense, but I can't remember it enough to describe it right now. And then not very long, less than 10 seconds later, she was born. But in those 10 seconds, it was like I was hovering above the toilet. And that's not where I had, quote unquote, planned.
Right, planned.
To give birth, whatever that means. I had this picture in my mind of I was going to be on a futon mattress on the floor in front of my altar with the candles and the things and my affirmation paintings and everything. And I was going to be in, running squat. And I was going to catch her with my hands onto the mattress. And she ended up, crowning into the toilet. And I kind of half stood up, hovering above the toilet after her head was born. And Matt had really quickly put out the Chuck's pads on the floor. And my mom and him were like, do you want to get onto the floor to birth her? Because they knew that I wanted to be in that position for birthing. And I was like, no, I can't move. It's okay. I'm going to have to do it here. And this was all within 10 seconds before she was born. And I thought that I wasn't going to be able to reach her fully enough to catch her well with my belly in the way in that position. And so I told my mom, I need you to help catch her. And so my mom put her hands between my thighs, and I had this funny sensation when her head was out that my mom was pushing her up into me or pushing on her head, which is really interesting because during my own birth, when I was born, they held me in because they were suctioning my nose because there was meconium. Mm-hmm. And so they had held me in and kind of stopped me from being born at the moment that I wanted to. And so I thought that was really interesting that I thought that she was holding her in. And I said, stop, don't push her back in. Stop pushing her in. And my mom said, I'm not. I had just felt her, I think, just kind of sucking back up the tiniest
I feel like a lot of people say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially in a situation where, obviously no one's touching them, like a water birth or something.
Right.
They'll be like, don't do that. What? No one's doing anything. It's just your baby.
Right, yeah. It just feels so intense, to have a baby in you.
And moving.
But out of you. And moving and somebody else is affecting something. And little did I know, it was Ruby.
Right.
And I did know, just not in that headspace.
Right, of course.
And so I thought that was really interesting. And so within 10 seconds from the second to last contraction, I had the 3rd fetal ejection reflex contraction, and she just shot out into me and my mom's hands, and we were just kind of in awe while Matt looked on and just whoa, that just happened. Because honestly, before those last 3 contractions, I didn't know in my labory, fuzzy brain that that's where I was in the labor. And so it felt incredibly fast and incredibly what the hell just happened? And so at that point, though, I was like, oh, I know how to do this. Like, I went immediately into, like, apprentice midwife brain. It was like, okay, get the bowl. I'm gonna, Ruby came out crying. Like, she was doing fine. I knew that she was totally fine. Even if she wasn't crying, I would have known that. You want to go there? Oh. And she wakes up just for this moment right now to get on my nipple. That's so funny. Aww. You were born!
Yay!
And so then within like 5 minutes after kind of turning her on her side and letting her get all the gunk out, I turned her over and my mom put my glasses on me and I got to see her and it was amazing and kind of like, who are you? Like, of course I know you, but there's this totally like otherworldly feeling of like, who the hell are you and where'd you come from?
Yeah.
At the same time as like knowing her so intimately. It's like a very interesting, paradox to be in. And so, my brain just stopped, sorry. So I was holding her and then I could feel the placenta there and it was a part of the birth that I was really looking forward to. And it was like where I regained my control that I didn't have it all throughout the whole birth. Like, okay, I'm going to direct perfectly this placenta birth.
That's what I love about it too. You're like there, you're grounded again.
Yeah, it helps you kind of ground back in to like being on Earth and doing the things. And so they brought the placenta bowl over and set it right in front of the toilet. And I didn't want to push it into the toilet because I was gonna ingest it later. So I just squatted down with Ruby in one arm and
like a pro.
Yeah, and just directed on out, which I had done with other women before. So I knew what the perfect feel of like tension and not for the cord, and it just plopped right into the bowl. Perfect. And then I sat on the Chuck's pad on the bathroom floor just to get Ruby on her first latch, which she did great. And I was like, in my brain, I was like, I want to sit here and wait for Marin so that she could see this in its full glory.
Totally.
In a bathroom covered in blood and just like the full on, and so my mom went and got me some electrolyte tea and I, had some cheese. My mom's dog, Lucy, was not interested in the baby or the blood or anything or the placenta. She wanted the cheese. And so, yeah, we cut the cord maybe like 4 hours later, and I think that was a little soon for me. It was a little emotional.
Yeah.
And throughout my postpartum, I kind of struggled with like, it happened so fast, and it felt really hard to integrate. Although I feel like that's probably similar to how a lot of women feel in general after birth. Like, it's a lot to integrate no matter what.
Right.
And no matter how, like, your birth was or what the nature of it was, like, those veils just open really fast and then they close just as fast. And it's just this feeling of, like, powerlessness in their closing. And you can't slow it down and you just have to kind of, like, absorb and process as much as possible. But there's all kinds of other stuff going on and, like, sleeplessness going on. So there's a lot of moving pieces. And, I mean, it's just a powerful time in general. I mean, I could talk about it for hours, honestly. But
yeah, I mean, I feel like there's, a couple topics that would be good for more podcasts, so we could focus a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, you have such an interesting perspective, like being a first-time mom and being a birth worker. So I don't know if you want to, I mean, you're welcome to talk about whatever, but those seem like the things that make your story even more unique.
Right.
Because those are both unique places to be. Most people having their first baby, well, I mean, in general, have the baby in a hospital or do something, so managed. And so to have such a free experience, like, I'm envious of, like, I did, I mean, my story was just different. So I always admire first-time moms that just, like, go for it. And then knowing stuff, too, I think, doesn't make it easier. Like, anybody that thinks it does, it really doesn't. Like, once you start to learn about birth, I think in a lot of ways it can make it sort of harder to find your own story amidst all of the knowledge. But you also did that really well and feel like, I mean, it looks like you and Ruby just, like, claimed that, for yourself outside of anything you had seen or learned, which is really super cool. So
Yeah. Well, I think that it was really interesting through my, like, in preparing for birth. I thought I was going to have like the time and all of these moments through my birthing process that I was going to be able to like reflect and like make all these choices about where I was going in the birth next, and like
Right.
Have these moments where I was having trouble mentally or emotionally coping, and that wasn't the case at all. Like, my birth just went, and I had no choice in it, and I was taken for a ride, which has its, like, great parts, and its not so great parts. Like, nothing could have stopped that train.
Right.
Like, mental stuff, emotional stuff, like, none of it. I couldn't have stopped it if I wanted it to, you know? And so, I keep coming back to, like, those fears that I had about not being able to handle it, and, like, worrying that I would, like, want to go to the hospital and get an epidural,
Right.
when in, like, my mental mind, like, that's the last place I would want to be.
Right.
And I felt like when I was, after the birth, when I was trying to find places to claim the powerful birth, because I didn't feel powerful after the birth. It was very intense.
Right.
When I was trying to claim that, like, in my mind, finding those places where I could, like, latch on to, I was reminding myself, I didn't ever once say I can't do it, or I didn't ever once say I want an epidural, I want to go to the hospital. And I'm not saying that I'm not judging women who do.
Right.
Like, those are incredibly, like,
Sure.
coping mechanisms, even if you don't, or even if you do go get those things. Like, women need what they need. But for me, like, those were some of my biggest fears, is not being able to do it, and, like, that coming up for me in the labor and birth. And I didn't have one thought of leaving. After I experienced that, I was like, oh my God. To the women who can go out of their front door and get in a car and drive an hour.
That's brave in a lot of ways.
That's super brave.
Right.
Like, I don't even know how one gathers themselves to do that. So, wow. And so, yeah. I lost my train of thought just now. The train of my birth just, like, derailed me.
Well, and you're nursing a baby, and I mean, it's all par for the course, I think, you know, this many months postpartum, which, how many months are we?
Almost 4. She'll be 4 months on the 19th.
Yeah, so like out of the sort of haze of the 4th trimester, but, you know, we were saying before the podcast that no matter whose birth story it is, no matter what baby it is, every time you tell it, it's a little bit different. So I just appreciate Annika being here today and sharing so much of her heart and, you know, her beautiful journey, which selfishly I'm so sad to have missed. So this is really nice, I think, for us to do. I feel like I'm getting to relive it with her and hear the detail that I wasn't blessed to actually see. But, you know, obviously it's perfect and beautiful. And Ruby came with such a great story that I think is beyond inspirational. So let's look forward to doing some other chats, perhaps, on these other topics. I think that's really needed, and I think our relationship is fun and, like, would be fun for people to hear.
Yeah.
You know, the perspectives that we have working together. So let's wrap it up with that. And yeah, thanks everybody for listening. You know how to reach Annika most likely. You can, get her on Facebook, or how would you like people to contact you if they want to ask you anything? Or
find me on Facebook. I'm listed as one of the admins in the Indie Birth community group, I think. So you can find me there. Sometimes I take breaks from Facebook, but I'm usually on Messenger still. Otherwise, you can reach me by email at annikanatsway@gmail.com.
Awesome. And I can always pass on messages as well. So feel free to email me. I'll get it to Annika. Thanks so much for holding space for this very special story today. We appreciate you. Visit the indiebirth.org site for new content, and we'll talk to you soon.